Merkel Media.
This was all circulating around the base that a giant had been killed, but no one was supposed to talk about it.
I saw 3 long, bony fingers reach up underneath the door, curl up to grab it, and then disappeared.
When he came over to me, dude, he slithered over to me.
And this giant comes out of the cave, and they're all frozen. And he starts running and firing at this giant. But the giant moves. He's got a spear in one hand, and he's running really fast and spears Dan and holds him up like this. Somebody yells, shoot him in the face, shoot him in the face. They basically decapitate him.
Got closer. When he got about 15 yards away from me, I raised that 12 gauge and I blowed his head off.
I feel something pulling at my leg. And I look over and there are 2 small gray entities pulling at me. And they're literally, I'm getting pulled off the bed.
I reached my hand into this bush and I touched air. Couldn't breathe and I couldn't move because I know I'm seeing a monster.
You're listening to The Confessionals. I am your host, Tony Merkel. Thank you for being here. If you've had an encounter or a story you'd like to share with me on the show, go ahead and shoot me an email. My email address is theconfessionalspodcast@gmail.com. That's theconfessionalspodcast@gmail.com. Or go to the website, theconfessionalspodcast.com, hit the connection section, and you can reach me that way as well. Either way works for me. Just get a hold of me. Now, for this week's Art Bell iTunes 5-star ratings and reviews, we have Legend of Justin, Bash Argo, K. Bine, Big Bird 91, Nicholas J, Diller Farms, Eric G 23, Cat Dad 07, 9422 Guy, Mike in WY, Jonathan as Aris, La Re RW, Chill Will 0351, Brunello, Shine Down Asking For It, TYS White Sox, and Delmage69. Thank you very much for going to iTunes and leaving a 5-star rating and review. It helps the show out a great deal. And if you want to get a shout out on next week's show, go to iTunes and leave a 5-star rating and review. Now, moving on to the Patreon shout outs. This is for anybody who goes to patreon.com/The Confessionals and signs up to become a patron to help support the show on a monthly basis. And this week's shout outs we have Charles S. and Troy W. Thank you very much for doing that, fellas. I really do appreciate it. Now, this week's show, we have 2 interviews coming on. The very first one we're going to listen to is Jim Harold from the Paranormal Podcast and many other podcasts. He comes on to talk about some spooky experiences that he's had. And then after Jim, we're going to have Alika, who is one of the show's artists, who does the weekly show art. And he comes on to talk about different experiences that he's had, including gorilla men, doppelgangers, demons, and many, many other things. I can't wait for you guys to hear what Alika has to say, so let's get into it right now. Okay, today we have a great guest coming on. We have Jim Harold. Now, Jim, you have many podcasts. You have Campfire, or I should say Jim Harold's Campfire, the Paranormal Podcast, Jim Harold's Crime Scene, and you actually just dropped a new podcast called Soulmate Stories. So, Jim, how are you?
I'm doing well. I'm tired, actually. I'm doing well, and thank you so much for having me on the show, and congratulations with all of your success with the Confessionals.
Well, I appreciate that, sir. I was really excited to have this conversation with you and just have you on and share some things and stuff. But before we get into some of the stories that you'd like to share with us today, why don't you tell us a little bit about some of the podcasts and stuff that I just kind of named off?
Well, back in 2005, before some of you were born, I started a show called The Paranormal Podcast because, and I was reading your bio, Tony, and it's very similar. I was just really interested in this stuff. And I had a broadcast background, ended up working in business, in the business of media, but not in front of a mic, which is actually what I went to school for. So in 2005, I saw all these people were doing this podcasting thing. And I said, I'll try it just for fun. Lo and behold, I did it for several years as a hobby, and it started picking up steam, and I was able to go full-time with it in 2012. And we have the Paranormal Podcast, which interviews with experts and so forth in the paranormal, supernatural, everything from UFOs, cryptid creatures, ghosts, the whole thing. Then we have Jim Harold's Campfire, which is a show where regular people call in and tell their stories of the supernatural. We've been doing that since 2009. Jim Harold's Crime Scene, where I interview experts and authors about true crime cases. We've had just recently had another Pulitzer Prize winner on that show. And then the newest one you talked about, and I'm really excited about, and we're recording this. I hope I'm not blowing anything here, but we're recording this on Valentine's Day. It's called Soulmate Stories, and it's all about people's true stories of how they found their lifelong soulmate. And I'm doing that one with my wife, Dar, so I'm very excited about that one. And we have a whole slew of premium podcasts I do, but I don't even really get into those. It's in similar topics, but I always steer new people to the free shows, which they can find at jimharold.com. Or they can find on all the places you listen to podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, where Pandora, as I think you mentioned, you're on now, all those usual places. So we hope people do check it out. And the Campfire also, we have 5 books based on the Campfire stories that we've gleaned over the years, and I'm working on a 6th. So busy over here at the spooky studio, as we call it.
Yes, absolutely. But you know what? You're really onto something with the soulmate stories. Especially, I really love the idea. There's something about people's real life stories, whether it's spooky stuff, soulmate stuff, or whatever. When people get to come on and share what happened to them and how things unfolded in their lives, a lot of people love listening to that kind of thing. There's something that people can connect to. So I really highly encourage people to check out your podcast and the new podcast, Soulmate Stories. It's very, very good. I've listened to it.
Thank you.
I love it. So, Jim, you've had some odd experiences in your life that you'd like to share with our audience today.
Well, the thing is that I've not had like the prototypical ghost experiences, but I've had some very bizarre experiences, as has my wife. I'm actually going to tell one of her stories because I think you'll relate to it, and I think it's a pretty cool story. And then I'll tell quickly one of mine. This happened back in 2001, and this was before I was ever podcasting, before really podcasting existed. So it wasn't one of those things where it happened and I said, oh, this will be a neat show for a podcast, because again, it wasn't even invented at that time. My mother-in-law had been very ill, and she came for in-home hospice back to her home. And I'd been married to my wife for a few years. We were a young couple at that time. We had a little daughter who would have been almost 2 years old. And my mother-in-law, obviously she was going towards the end, but we thought we had some time. And that particular evening that I'm going to tell you about, my wife was over there, and I think I was home with my daughter. And my mother-in-law kind of kept shooing away my wife, Dar, saying, you got to go home. Jim's there. Your small child's there. You got to be with them. And she said, no, I'll stay here with you a little longer. No, go home. So anyway, we didn't think anything of it. And she came home and we went to bed as usual, 11:30, whatever time of the night it was. And then I think about 1:30 or 2:30 in the morning, can't remember exactly which, she awoke. Now I was asleep, as she jokes, I'm like waking the dead when I'm asleep. And she looked over my shoulder and she saw Mother Mary glowing, standing on my side of the bed. And I was oblivious. And the thing of it is, you need to know that Mother Mary was a big deal for my mother-in-law because she was Catholic, and she would bring roses to the statue of Mother Mary. It was a whole thing for her. It was a big deal and very significant in her life. And then almost as fast as it happened, I think it lasted about 30 seconds, Mother Mary was gone. She was smiling. She said it was extremely peaceful and unlike anything you would see in any movie or artist's depiction. So anyway, and she says this was not a dream. She was fully awake. She goes back to sleep. She sleeps for an hour. The phone rings. It's my father-in-law. My father-in-law doesn't even say hello. He just basically says she's gone. And my wife, when you wake up and you pick up the phone, you're confused. What's going on? And he said, she's gone. She said, well, who's gone? Your mother's gone. She passed away about a half hour ago. And even now I get kind of choked up thinking about it.
Yeah.
And to me, that was my mother-in-law sending that sign through Mother Mary or whatever the case was, is that she had left, but she was going to a better place.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, the idea of Mother Mary popping up and stuff, I've heard that before, and it's usually always connected with somebody's passing. And I find that very, very fascinating and stuff. Was that something that you guys kind of like found comfort in when you found out that she had passed?
I think so, yes. Because it was kind of an assurance. Yes, she's gone from this physical plane, but she's gone to a better place. That's the way we took it. I had another story that is not, it's not quite as sweet, but it's cool. About a year and a half ago, I was lucky enough to be asked to be a participant in a paranormal cruise where people would sign up and come to this cruise and meet me and some other people in the paranormal field, Rosemary Ellen Guiley, Micah Hanks, and so on. I was very honored to do it. So the one day we were at sea, and we were in this. They had a nice conference room, and I had a bit of a cold. Not a lot of fun when you're on a cruise, but I had a cold, and I was speaking, and I said, you know what? I'm going to in between sessions go grab some coffee just to kind of warm up the pipes a little. So I walk out, and it's right next to the casino for the ship. You have to walk through the casino to get to the cafe with the coffee. And one of the gentlemen who was an attendee who was listening to our talks that day is playing like this claw machine that has money in it. Now, if you know those claw machines, like when you go to a store and they've got the little stuffed animals and it's got the really polished claws where the stuffed animal falls off invariably. Well, the thing of it was that had a lot of significance for me, those claw machines. I almost stopped in my tracks. I very specifically thought of my uncle who had passed in 2013, and he had been like a second dad to me. And for some reason, he loved those claw machines. And he would go and he would try to win for my daughters or anybody. He would try to win one of these things, and he would spend, $7 or $8 trying to win a 99-cent stuffed doll. So he loved these things. I thought about him very intensely. And I said, I wish he were here. He would love playing that. That would be so cool. And I just thought about him very intensely. And about 2 seconds later, this woman walks upside next to this gentleman playing this crane machine. And she cups her hand to her mouth and she says, John, ostensibly calling out to her husband or something she's with. Guess what the name of my uncle was?
John.
His name was John. Now, to me, and again, the skeptic will say that was a coincidence. That was just something that happened, right? I personally believe that was my uncle somehow connecting the dots and getting a message to me. Is like, hey, you're thinking about me. I'm thinking about you too. I mean, it was just too big of a coincidence to be a coincidence, in my view.
Sure.
So those are my two stories. So I think we live on. I think there's communication that goes on. And I know a lot of times when on the campfire, we talk about a lot of scary stories. And there's a lot of scary stories on there. So if people love that kind of stuff, they can certainly tune in. But there's some of those sweet stories too. And I think that it's like life. Life is a continuum. There's good and there's bad. There's happy and there's sad. There's a positive influence, there's evil influence. I think the paranormal and the supernatural is like that. It's a whole continuum, and we try to cover it all on the campfire.
Well, that's awesome, sir. That's awesome. Let me ask you a quick question here. With the idea of your uncle communicating with you and stuff, is that something that you find in a lot of the stories that you hear on the show with those kind of things where people are, they feel like somebody's communicating with them from the other side? Is that something that's popular on the show a lot?
Oh, yeah. We hear it all the time. And sometimes it's very direct and sometimes it's more subtle, but it's there. And it's usually the thing is it's in a very distinct way that's very personal to the experiencer. Like that claw machine, anybody else that would have meant nothing to. But to me, I knew the significance. So I think they know what will touch us and what will reach us. And they seize upon that thing to get their message across.
Absolutely. I totally agree with you. Before we get out of here, let people know where to find you again.
JimHarold.com. That's JimHarold.com. And they can find all the free podcasts, the books. We even have an email newsletter. So you.
All right, today we have a great guest coming on. We actually have one of our show's artists on the line today. If you guys were to follow us on social media or on the website, you would see the artwork that's custom every week for that week's show. And we have two different artists that do that. And one of the artists, his name is Alika, and he's in Hawaii, and he's on the line right now. Alika, how you doing, man?
Doing awesome, man. How you doing?
I'm doing good, brother. I'm doing good. So you've had some crazy experiences that I didn't really know about. I mean, when we're talking about the show art from week to week and stuff, sometimes you talk about, what inspired you, and sometimes your own personal experiences come up in conversation. And we always talk about sometimes about having you come on. And then you sent me a list of some things that you went through. And we're talking about some doppelgangers, evil reflections and mirrors, little boy ghosts. And I was just like, bro, I don't know how I never had you on the show yet, but let's do this. And so here we are. You've had some crazy experiences, man. And I know we just talked about having you do it in chronological order. So if you wouldn't mind, just kind of start off from the beginning with that little boy ghost.
Okay, so I'll start off with, so my background a little bit. I've always had paranormal experiences, and that's what attracted me to the show, because I've always had a deep interest in it because of it's always happened in my life. And so this is one of those many things, and this is probably the most consistent places or one of the most consistent places that I've experienced anything paranormal. And so this is my ex-fiance's house. I'll call her D. So my ex-fiance's house, and she told me a little bit about it, that her house is a little bit haunted. But I did not know to what extent. And so I show up, we just started dating. I'm at her house, and we had a little family lunch. So a little get together, and some people had already left, and I'm all full with food. I'm ready to take a nap. So I go into her room to take a nap. And the way the house is set up is you walk into the front door. You see a big living room, a kitchen right behind that, and then it's a straight shot outside to the backyard, big sliding doors, and then on the right-hand side is a long hallway with all the rooms, starting with the bathroom, and then her brother's room, and then her parents' room, and her room's all the way at the end. So I'm about 26 at the time, so about 6 or 7 years ago. And so back to the family get together. I'm ready to go take a nap. I'm all full, so I go into the room to lie down. I'm just starting to doze off a little bit. She comes into the room, tells me she's going to go shopping with her brother. They're going to go grab some food. I was like, oh, okay, that sounds good. And so she walks out of the room. And maybe about, 5 or 10 minutes later, I'm still kind of awake, and I'm still dozing, in and out of sleep. But I can still hear. I'm still aware of what's going on around me, and I hear footsteps coming down the hallway. And I hear them coming all the way down the hallway, through the doorway, into the room, and right next to me. So I'm lying down on my stomach, and my feet are to the door. And so the footsteps stop right there, right next to me, next to the bed. And I'm completely expecting Dee to say, oh, okay, so we're going to leave now. See you later, and I'll be back, or whatever, something. I'm just expecting that. And I hear nothing, so I find it kind of weird, and I open my eyes, and I look next to the bed, and nothing's there. Nobody's there. And I'm completely confused because I didn't hear anybody leave. I heard somebody come in the room, stop right there. So I get up, and I'm thinking, okay, this might be one of her nieces and nephews that were there for the family party. So I walk outside. Nobody is home except for her mom, and her mom is just coming in from the backyard. So I look at her mom like, oh, is Dee around? Is anybody else home? And she goes, no, just us. Like, oh, okay. So now I'm thoroughly freaked out. because she told me Dee had left with her brother about 10 minutes earlier, and I have no idea what's going on. So I explained to her what's happening, and she proceeds to explain to me, like, oh, okay, so you met him. Oh, okay, so he went to go greet you. He must like you. I was like, oh, who's he? And then she tells me about this little boy ghost that's in the house, haunting this house. And her first introduction to it was years and years before. So apparently these parents had known of this ghost since they first moved in like the late 70s, early 80s. And so her first introduction to this little boy ghost was when they were much younger, and she was vacuuming the living room. And so she just vacuumed, you know, like how you got lines in the carpet when you vacuum, right?
Yeah.
So she had just finished vacuuming the living room, and she went into the kitchen. She came back out into the living room, and she sees little footsteps, little kids' footsteps all over the living room carpet, and nobody's home except her. So she's super freaked out. Her dad shared an experience, and he hates talking about it because he's old school generation tough guy. You know, he's in the military, everything. Like, does not want to talk about anything paranormal. But he said one time he went to go use the bathroom at the very beginning of the hallway, turned back to go towards his room, and he sees a little boy, a shadow of a little boy right in the middle of the hallway. And like he just was frozen. He started walking toward it, and this little boy ran down the hallway and disappeared. And so there's this entity that lives there that I had no clue about, and apparently he likes me. So that was my first introduction to the paranormal experiences in this house. And so I started asking Dee about it, and so she was telling me, you know, that she's had her dreams about all of this stuff going on, and there's other things there, and she doesn't know what they are. And I'm like, oh, okay, great. That's cool. But I don't know, I'm used to this by now. So I'm like, okay, I'm kind of interested. This is kind of what I've been going for my whole life, where I always went ghost hunting before as a younger guy. And it's like, okay, I've hit the gold mine. I don't have to go hunting for them. I'm right here. Like, they're here. So we're going to have something pop off. And so as they, you know, I was with her for about a year and a half. Or almost 2 years. So in that time, 4 other occurrences happened. So that was my introduction to it, was the little boy ghost. And so the next one, the demonic doppelganger. So this one really threw me off.
Yeah.
So the way this happened, my introduction to that was, again, I was in the bedroom, I was in her room, and I think we were looking for movie times or something. So this is a couple months after the little boy thing. So I think we were looking for movie times or something. I was checking something on my phone, and I wanted to go tell her whatever I found on my phone. And I walked down the hallway, and with my peripheral vision, if you're going down the hallway from her room at the very end, her brother's room is about halfway down the hallway. And her brother had a pull-up bar in his doorway, and he had his clothes hanging on the pull-up bar. So all those clothes are hanging, and I'm walking down, and I walk past his room, but out of my peripheral vision, I see these legs right next to his bed. So I turn and I go, hey, babe, so blah, 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 whatever I had to tell her. I'm pretty sure it was a movie time. And so I'm talking, and I face her, and I'm talking to her, what I think is her, and then I hear her voice from the kitchen. She goes, what? I was like, so I look up immediately, because I just get this cold feeling start from the tip of my head all the way down my body, this chill. I'm like, and I move the clothes. I look up, I move the clothes. Nothing is there. Nobody's there. But I swear I saw feet and legs standing right next to her brother's bed, right there. And so nothing is there. And I'm like, I thought you were in the room. She's like, why did you think I was in the room? I saw your legs in the room. And so she's just like, what? I think you left your legs in the room, you know, like I'm totally freaked out and thrown off. She's like, what? You saw me in the room. And so I walk out there. No, of course, once again, nobody else is home except for me and her. And she then tells me, you know, it's like an onion, just layers just keep coming out. After everything that happens, more stuff keeps coming out. And so she tells me that she has a what she called a dark double. And so I was like, what? So she explains it to me, and this is kind of like in my ballpark that I would spend a lot of time in, because I had a lot of friends who were into paranormal and occult and any which belief you wanna choose. I had a friend for every one of them, and she was the same way. And so she explained to me that she had what was called a demonic double or a dark double, where somebody, I guess a psychic or a medium or a sensitive, had told her that he saw a double version of her, like a shadow that was always following her around. And it was like a dark, jealous reproduction of her. So it's like her dark side, but it's external, and it would follow her around. So I'm like, okay, that could explain it a little bit, you know. So I take that I take all of that with a grain of salt until it happens to me. Like I am open to everything, but until it happens to me, I don't believe it, you know.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, it's a pretty good indication. Could have been a fluke. Maybe my eyes are playing tricks on me. Fine. So a couple months go by. I try to forget about it, and that leads to the third occurrence, which is the demonic doppelganger in bed. So it's not as fun as you think.
No.
It's not as fun as it sounds. But so I'm in there. I'm in her room again. But we had gone out and we stayed out really late. I think it was 4 a.m. by the time we got back home. So again, it's just us. And so we're in her room, we're sleeping, and I have no clue what time this was or anything like that. All I know is, out of dead sleep, I'm sleeping on my stomach. I'm on the left side of the bed. Out of dead sleep, I just shoot up into full awareness, into a full push-up stance. That's how I woke up. I woke up from feeling myself push myself up into a full push-up stance, and I'm basically planking in bed. And I'm in this state of terror and panic, and I don't know why. So I'm up on my hands, and I look over to my right. You know, so I'm just checking to see if Dee is still there. So I look over to my right. She's lying down, and she's not facing me. And she was Korean, Chinese, and Filipino. So she's got this long black Asian hair, right? So I just see that. Okay, she's turned away from me. All right, and then I'm like, okay. And then I look back down, straight down, and I see her again. And she's lying down on the other side of me. And I'm like, well, what? So my brain is not calculating. So I'm looking down. I see her lying there, but it's like she's really, really close. And so I look and I see at my hand, I notice that my left arm is going straight through her head.
Yo.
And yeah. So I just immediately, I understandably jump out of bed, freaking the F out. And I'm like yelling, I'm like, babe, wake up. And she's like, what's going on? What's wrong? She wakes up out of a deep sleep. And I'm like, I just saw you. You were here. And then you were here. And I don't know. I don't know what's going on right now. Like, I don't know what's going on. And so she was saying that, like, in her dream that she was having, she just came back to bed to lie down. And I was like, this is crazy. This is too much. So she had this dream that she was going through the hallway and she came back to the room to lie down. And just so happens, I wake up in a dead sleep panic and I see this apparition of an exact copy of her lying down I had no idea what to think.
Wow.
Yeah. But that was probably the most intense visual paranormal experience that I've ever had. Because I think it was because I had no expectation of it whatsoever. It woke me up out of sleep. I was already in panic, and this whole thing happens. And that will always be burned into my head. I'll never forget seeing my left arm go straight through the head of somebody else that's right next to me on the other side. It's so weird. It's like a mirror image. So that one totally threw me off. And the next one was an auditory experience. So another couple months go by, and once again, me and D are at home by ourselves. We were actually house sitting because some of the family had gone, including her parents, had gone to Vegas. So we were house sitting, and this is pretty late at night. We were just sitting out in the living room on the couch, watching some TV. And so she's lying down. She's got her head in my lap, lying down, and she's sleeping. And I'm just kind of petting her head. And I lie back, and I'm starting to doze off a little bit. So I lean back, and just when I'm about to just go into sleep, and I'm petting her head, I'm still moving my hand, I hear this clear, audible female whisper right into my ear. And it's like she's whisper screaming, "Stop it." And she just says that right here, and my eyes shoot open, and I don't want to panic D at this point. I'm just done. She knows already. I'm pretty sure you're used to it. So I'm just there trying to calm down, bring down my heart rate, and pet her head a little bit. And the only thing I could attribute that to was her double. And so I told her about it later. And, she was saying, yeah, because according to the person that saw that I had a double, he said I was very jealous. It was like all the negativity in her manifested into this other thing that was her evil twin, I guess you could say, right? So I was like, yeah, that makes sense. If she's jealous and maybe she wanted to lie down next to me instead of you, I don't know. That was super weird. And so that event happened, and that led up to the final thing that happened there, well, at that house anyway, was the evil reflection. And so that evil reflection that one sent chills down both our spines, because it wasn't just me hearing it. It wasn't just me seeing it this time. It was me and her sitting there watching the same thing happen. So there's another witness to corroborate, So she told me about this mirror in her room. She always had it covered. And, one day I asked her, "Oh, why do you always have it covered?" She said, "It just gives me this weird feeling. It just feels really weird when I look at it. It's like my reflection is looking at me. I'm not looking at it." And I was like, that's super weird. Okay, so what makes you think it's a bad thing? And she's like, I just get this bad vibe. And so I said, okay, I want to take a look at it, because in the past, starting in high school, I just started learning about how to keep myself safe, because I was as a kid, I would get tormented a lot by these unseen things that I never understood until later on in life, and I understood what they were and how to manage and how to deal with it. And so I had learned how to use that belief to keep myself spiritually safe and keep things away from me, or expel things out of the space that I occupy. And so I said, okay, maybe I can go look at it. Maybe I can get rid of whatever's there. Maybe we can take that mirror back. I don't know. Let's try it out. I just want to see what happens. So she uncovers the mirror. We both sit there in front of the mirror. I get myself into this space where I'm open, where I can feel the vibes, basically. Sounds super hippy dippy and woo woo, but that's exactly what I did. I just sat there and tried to tune in, see what's going on. So I'm looking at the reflection just to see if maybe I'll experience what she experienced. So we're both looking at the reflection. We're both trying to get into this state of being open to whatever's going on. And I'm looking all over the mirror, just looking all around, looking at the wood that surrounding the frame. And this is an old mirror too. It's like an antique mirror. So everybody's got this stigma about antiques that maybe something followed the antique. So my eyes are scanning the images in the mirror, and it just so happens to scan all. I just get up to my own eyes. I look down at my own eyes, and me and Dee are looking at it at the same time, and I just see my eyes look at me, because my eyes are. So it's weird. My eyes are still moving, trying to scan. They're constantly moving around the mirror slowly. But I noticed that my eyes in my reflection aren't moving. They're looking straight at me.
Wow.
And then I see this smirk. I see this smirk on my face in the reflection. And it's just the most evil look. Like, it looks like the eyes are looking straight through me. And I know it sounds weird for me to say, oh, I didn't see my eyes moving, because who can see their eyes moving? If you're not looking at your eyes, you can't see them not moving, right? So, but it's just this gaze that is held and stuck there. And it's just like it's looking through me. And the thing that set it off was that smirk, man. Because I know I wasn't smirking. I wasn't making any expression on my face, and this thing smirks at me, and I look over at this reflection, and her mouth just opens up, and I'm just like, oh, that made me panic extra hard, because it's like in a scary movie when the scary part comes up, and you think you got it, but the person next to you screams, and all of a sudden you want to scream, and that's exactly how I felt seeing this reflection, because she was totally shocked. She like backs up. She kind of pushes me and backs up from the mirror. I was like, you saw that? And she's like, yeah, I saw that. It's smirk. You weren't smirking. I know you weren't smirking because I was at you and looking back at the mirror. I know you weren't smirking. And I was like, yeah, I wasn't smirking. But you saw that look. She's like, it was so evil. I was like, yeah, that's exactly what I thought. And so we just immediately leave the room. And needless to say, we got rid of that mirror pretty quickly. Like, there was no expelling to be done on that mirror. Just for it to look at me that way, like, I don't know, man. I don't know. I don't think you've got a handle on this.
Yeah, you might might be in over your head a little bit.
Yeah. So this one was a super chilling one. I've never experienced anything like that where my own reflection is like is interacting with me. Like, it's so weird. That's one of the freakiest things that I've seen visually. But number one definitely goes to the evil doppelganger right next to me. That was the freakiest one.
Yeah.
And yeah. And so she just had this it's like she was as a person, she was a magnet for this kind of stuff. Because as soon as I started dating her, she first started, hanging out at my place before. So she would always spend time there, and I started noticing an uptick in weird activity at my house after I started dating her. So one of those things, the first thing that happened at my house, we were dating for maybe 2 or 3 weeks, and so she was sleeping at my house, and I was out at a party, and she called me up at 1 a.m, and she told me, or she asked me like, "Are you almost done with the party?" And I was like, "Oh wow, what's going on?" I'm thinking in my head already like, "Oh no, she's insecure." Like, we're 3 weeks in, like we're 2-3 weeks in. I'm like, "Ah, crap. Oh, what did I get myself into?" So that's my first assumption. She's like, "Okay, because I'm really freaked out right now." I'm like, oh, okay. So why are you freaked out? So she was lying down. She's sleeping in the living room, and this I had a fan in the living room, a standing fan, and she said that the fan turned on by itself, and oscillated completely one time. And she woke up because she, of course, heard the fan go off and or go turn on, and then she felt the air, and so she turned around and she looked at it, and it oscillated one full time, and then it stopped. And this is one of those dial fans. Like, you got to turn it was an older fan. You have to turn the dial to get it to turn on. So it wasn't like a touch control, nothing like that. Old school fan. And so I was like, that's super weird. So it was about time for me to go home anyway. So I went home and I checked out the fan. And I was like, maybe there's a surge or something. I don't know. Did anything else go off, or did you smell any burning or anything? She's like, no, I didn't smell anything. So I checked out the outlet. Everything was fine. I'm mechanically inclined, so I took the fan apart to go look see if anything shorted out, if one of the coils in the motor was touching a casing somewhere, if something happened. And so I opened it up, and nothing. There's no sign of it, and it never turned back on again. It never worked again. No matter what, there was no black burn on the plug. There was nothing on the outlet to tell me that there was a power surge. Nothing else, no reset clocks. Because this was on, so one outlet was just for the fan, and the other outlet had an extension cord for my entertainment center and all that. But nothing else was on. There was no surge. I couldn't find any reason for it. And my background was an electrician. I used to work for Pearl Harbor as an electrician. So I was well versed with diagnosing and troubleshooting stuff, and it was just, I couldn't find any explanation for it. So I thought that was really weird. And that was one of the weird things that happened, the first weird things that happened when she showed up at my place. And the next, she wasn't home one day. She went back home to go to hang out with her family. And so I was at home alone, and I was just getting down to sleep. And the house I used to live in was a old plantation style house. It was a 2-bedroom, all wood, on a raised house. So the bottom is hollow. So I was just getting down to bed, and I hear what sounds like Macho Man Randy Savage jumping off the top ropes and elbowing the ground. Like, it was the loudest boom I've ever heard in that house, aside from me dropping some weights when I was working out. And it immediately shot me out of bed. And I had no idea what it was, because sometimes there's cats that would fight underneath the house, and they would like bump and whatnot. Sometimes they would hit what would be right underneath the floor. But I heard nothing like that. I actually went outside with my flashlight to go look for anything that was going on underneath there. Nothing. There's no signs of any disturbance. As you can tell, there are cats fighting. There's stuff all over the place, and there's a lot of dust and dirt. You can see the footprints and all that. But nothing. No sign of any disturbance. And I look in the hallway. There's no marks on the floor or anything like that. And it sounded like it was right outside the door, like this, just a giant boom. So that was the second thing that happened when she showed up, and I'm starting to notice a pattern. You know, there's some weird stuff going on with this one, and probably the weirdest thing. So this is some of the bonus material that I didn't mention in the message. So this one was probably one of the weirder experience I had with D. You know what astral projection is. So I've heard other guests on the show talk about that a little bit. And so for people who don't know what it is, it's basically where your soul or consciousness leaves your body and you can travel to other places, but in real time. And so your consciousness can observe things remotely without you physically observing it in your body. So it sounds kind of woo and kind of out there, but here was my experience with that. So that Dee was known as a natural traveler. So she's told that by her crowd of her group of friends that also told her that she had an evil double. So she was a natural traveler, meaning that when she would go to sleep, she would leave her body, her soul, her consciousness would leave her body, and she would travel to all kinds of different places. And now things are starting to click with me. So she told me this after the whole demonic doppelganger thing, right? So she told me all of this after all of that. And I was like, okay, it's starting to make sense now. It's starting to click now. Because she had a dream that she was walking through the hallway and then lying down in bed. And then I see this thing right next to me. Okay, so it's starting to make sense. So this night, she had, for the 2 weeks prior to this, she was having a rough time, a real emotional roller coaster. And so she needed some space. So she ended up going to sleep, falling asleep by herself in my room. And this is at my house. And she had fallen asleep normally, and by normal, I mean her head is on the pillow, her feet is where her feet normally is, how we normally sleep. And you'll see why I mention that detail as the story progresses. So I go to sleep. She's already asleep. And I end up waking up in the middle of the night, and I have this quote unquote dream. And I know it's not a dream, and you'll see why. So I pop up, I sit up, and everything is pitch black, but everything is strobing. Like this super bright white light is strobing, and it's strobing in sync with my heartbeat. And my heart is racing because I woke up in this state of like hyper awareness and kind of borderline panic. So my heart is racing, the strobe is going off, and I see all this stuff going on, and I'm wondering what the hell's going on. And so I noticed that I'm moving over, and I can see my feet, and I'm flexible, but I'm not that flexible. And so I'm extra curious as to what's going on now, because I'm looking straight down at my feet, and I look to my left, and I see that her head is right there by my feet. I'm like, that's weird. And then I look into the corner of the room, right by where Dee's head is, and I see this thing in the corner of the room, and it looks like a negative photo where everything that's supposed to be white is black and everything that's supposed to be black is white, and it looks like a monkey, like a gorilla man, just the facial features, just everything that it is, and its pupils, its eyes are completely black, its pupils are white, and it's staring straight at me. And it's sitting in the corner of the room, kind of hunched over, and like it's almost 2D. It's trying to get to her, and it's looking at me like, "What are you gonna do about it?" And I speak to it, and I notice that my body, whatever, it starts rising up, and I'm trying to speak to it, but I'm speaking to it not with my mouth, but with my mind, and I'm telling it to leave, get the F out of here. And it's looking at me, and it's giving me this look like, okay, I'm not leaving. And so it's getting more aggressive, and I just feel this super aggressive tone and facial expressions coming at me, and everything starts strobing really hard. Like my heart is starting to race now because I'm getting into a fight now. And so this thing comes at me. It full on puts its arms and hands straight up to my shoulders like it's trying to choke my neck. And I do the same thing where I'm fighting it, but I can't see my arms and my hands, but I know I'm fighting this thing off. So we're in this battle in my room, in this strobing environment, and I'm trying my hardest to fight this thing away, and I end up pushing it away and out it goes through the wall and out into my backyard, and I'm watching it leave this whole time, but it's looking at me, it's backing up, and it's looking at me like I'm gonna come back. Like, this ain't over, buddy. And it's just got those white pupils are just burning a hole in my memory because I still see it backing up and kind of moving away, but just staring at me like this isn't over. But I got it away. So I got it away, and as soon as I watch it leave and it dissipates into the distance, I get sucked back into my body, and my eyes open, and I'm in a sweat already. And now, like, I can feel my body. I see my arms, and I know I'm in my body. And I'm like, oh, and I wake up, and I see that Dee is lying down exactly the way I saw her in this quote unquote dream. She is, her head is where my feet is at. And so I was like, okay, that wasn't a dream. And I wake her up and I just ask her, can you please lie down normally? Can you please just put your head on the pillow? She's like, oh, all right. No, she's groggy. She doesn't know why I'm waking her up in the middle of her sleep. But the next day I tell her about this whole thing, and she was like, you know, I couldn't sleep. I couldn't really sleep until you told me to put my head at the pillow. I didn't even know that I turned around like that. I was like, okay, so you weren't sleeping at all before? She's like, no, I kept waking up and going back to sleep. I was having horrible nightmares. And then after you woke me up to tell me to put my head on the pillow and that I was sleeping the wrong way, then I slept through the whole night. And I was like, huh, that's weird. Okay. So that one was a super weird experience that I had.
Yeah.
Nothing tops the doppelganger.
I don't know, man. I don't know, because what you just said and stuff, I'm just like, my jaw is dropped. I mean, I'm just like, that thing had, like you were talking about an onion earlier with that relationship, you know, it's like everything was an onion where you peel back another layer. I mean, that story was like an onion. I mean, it was like you had so much crap going on there. Do you think that whatever it was that you were having this, for lack of better terms, a battle with, do you think that caused your experience?
I think so. I really do, because it just thinking about the connections between the appearance of this thing and then how everything was only black and white, how I could only see everything in black and white, and this thing was like a negative. It looked like a negative photograph of a person. There's consistency there, and I feel like maybe it was calling me into its dimension or something like that to fight. Maybe I woke up and the only reason I could fight it off was because I had actually projected into its dimension where I could see it. You know, like there's a lot of discussion about how maybe Bigfoot could be interdimensional, or how Greys, when there's abductions, how they can be on a different plane because they can take you through walls when you're abducted by them. It's like they can control the vibration of whatever's going on in this material plane, and maybe they can travel through dimensions. And so that's kind of my theory with ghost entities, demons, that they're always around, but we can't interact with them if we don't have the same vibration. In the same way that polarized lenses can cut out glare because it's got, you know, the light can only enter in certain directions. Maybe that's the way our consciousness works, where we can only see what we see as we do because that's all we can accept. And maybe some people have different lenses that they can see other things through. And I feel like that experience was a trip into a different lens, where I could see it, I could interact with it because I'm in its realm, where I'm interacting with it as an astral body, or as a consciousness, not as a physical being. And you know, I just hear things about how you have alien abductions, and they say that they speak to you telepathically, and that's exactly the same way this thing was speaking to me, telepathically, and that's how I was speaking to it. And I've never done that at all in my life. Like, I've never spoken to anybody telepathically, but somehow I knew how to do it, and I was interacting with this entity without words, without any actual hard physical touch. So yeah, I think it's totally connected to what happened, to that whole event.
Did anything ever happen again since then? Like, did you ever feel like that thing returned to, you know, like you had that feeling it was going to come back, or it was telling you like, I'm going to come back. Did you ever feel like it did come back? And did you ever tell your girlfriend what happened?
Yeah. I told her about it. I told her what happened after she said, you know, how she was having a hard time sleeping. And I explained the whole thing to her, and she was pretty freaked out. I mean, understandably, to think that you're the object of some demonic entity or aggressive entity's affection, you know.
Yeah.
That's not very, very calming or settling at all. And so she was bothered by it, but I told her, well, I fought it off, so at least I can do something about it, you know. So you should feel safe, at least marginally, with me. So I told her about that. Something else happened after that. So connected to that thing, I was told by one of my other friends that are into this whole thing, all of this paranormal stuff, and he told me that that entity is now outside in the yard. So it stays outside now. I guess I kicked it out and I kept it out, but it still looks into the house. It still does things, you know, like through the windows and whatnot. It still will mess with me. And, you know, I've had little weird occurrences in the house where something would be knocking on the wall, and it sounded like somebody's knocking on the door. Sounds like a person. It doesn't sound like a branch. There were no trees that were touching my house, nothing like that. But it sounded like something was knocking on the wall, and it would do it only when I'm alone and when I'm about to fall asleep. That's kind of always when stuff would mess with me, even as a kid. And so there's that. There was a little knocking on the wall, but the real thing that bothered me, and not scared me, but yeah, just bothered me, was when I started dating my now wife. She had a son before me, and so he was about 2 years old when I met him, and we were about a year into the relationship, and he was sleeping over, and so he wanted to sleep in this little fort that we made in my second room that I had. So there was my bedroom and there was a second room. So he ended up going into the room, and he had never been afraid of the dark, really. Even now, he's not really afraid of the dark. And so I found it really weird that he was sleeping in that second room, and me and my wife, we were outside in the living room, and he ran outside, just terrified. And we were like, what's going on? Like, he was screaming. He couldn't even talk. He was just crying profusely, and he couldn't really put any words together. And by this time, like, he's 3 years old, so yeah, we expect that. But he could articulate his thoughts to us. He could speak to us in a way that we could understand at this point. So he couldn't speak. He was just panicked and terrified. And he finally calmed down, and he took us to the room, and he told us that somebody was coming through the window. And I was like, what? And so we were there, and I stood there, and I was looking for anything that would look like something coming through the window. Like, maybe he was mistaken. Maybe it was shadows. But, you know, I remember saying stuff like that when I was a kid, and nobody believed me. So I want to believe him, but I want to make sure that, you know, it's a real concern. Maybe it was mistaken. I don't know. So I'm looking around, and my wife, she's standing at the doorway looking into the room. The light is on now. So she's standing at the doorway, and I'm looking around the room for anything that it might be. And she screams. And I'm like, and once again, it's like that, us being in we're two people in a scary movie, and I'm not panicking, but as soon as she screams, I'm gonna scream. So I'm like, oh, what's going on? So she screams, and she goes, there was a face in the curtain. and I was like, a face in the curtain. And I look up and I'm like, what is going on? And she goes, there was a face. She calms down. There was a face in the curtain. I know this is going to sound super, super weird. Like, I know I'm imagining things, but the wind came through the curtain and it looked like somebody's head was coming through, like trying to come out of the curtain. And I was like, no way. She goes, no, I could see a head. I could see a face. I could see this big flat, like nose, like nostrils, but it looked like a gorilla. And I was like, oh my God. So I make the connection there.
Wow.
And I can't say for sure that it's the same thing. But Jacob, my stepson, he sees this thing. He tells us he sees like a man trying to come through the window. And it's this big, dark guy coming through the window. And then my wife, as we're trying to look for this thing, she sees a head coming. She sees the form of a face behind the curtain. Like it's trying to come through the window. And I'm just like, okay, so I guess it's not over then. So that was the only thing that happened after that. And we've moved out of that house now. Now we live in a different place. But that was the last thing connected to that entity that happened in that house.
Wow, man. Dude, so do you think that entity was strictly connected to that house, or was it to the ex-girlfriend and she kind of brought it to that house? I mean, that's crazy that your wife and stepson saw what you battled during your out-of-body experience. Right. And it freaked me out. And I don't know if it was just connected to D, or if it's connected to me. So a little backstory on that house that I used to live in, my old house. So that house was on a lot. There were 3 houses on that lot. The house I lived in was all the way at the end, all the way at the back of the lot. And then my mom lived in the middle house, and then my grandpa lived in the front house. Now, when we first moved into that lot, it was just my grandpa that had a house in that lot. My grandpa lived in my old house. He lived in the house that I was living in first. So that was when I was like 5 years old. He moved into that house, and he lived in that house until I was about 15. And then he moved into the first house. Now, when I was 26, when I was 24, I moved into that house that my grandpa first moved into. Now, when my grandpa was living there and I was a 5-year-old, I would play in the yard all the time by myself, but I would always feel uncomfortable whenever I was around this orange tree that grew in the yard. And that orange tree, like, it gave us sweet oranges and all that stuff. Like, nothing was too weird about it, but I always felt like something was watching me when I would play by that orange tree in the yard. And so I always avoided that area. I wouldn't really go by there when I was playing outside by myself. And so the same friend that told me that I had, I guess, banished that entity out into the yard told me that it was hanging out by that orange tree. And that window that my wife saw the face come through the curtain, or trying to come through the curtain, that window is directly in front, or the orange tree is directly outside that window. So I don't know if it was connected to me or if it's connected to that house or that land. Yeah, that's something, that was a question that I always wondered about. But I don't think it's connected to me because it never followed me. It's probably not connected to D, but if I connect all the dots now, maybe it's just connected to that land, that house. Well, orange you, glad you moved out of that house. I am. I'm glad. Womp womp. But that was my
my pretty much my childhood home. That was the only home I really knew, and it was the only consistent place that I really had, because I was on that property from 5 years old to 30 years old. So I was there for about 25 years.
Dude, man, those are some crazy experiences, dude. Like, why is it that when I do this show, I hear all these crazy stories, and I'm the one that doesn't ever experience anything? I just hear all the stories. I'm like, I mean, I don't think I want to experience what you experienced, but my Lord, have you ever felt like you were going crazy when you had some of these experiences?
Oh yeah. When I was younger, and that's why I really connected to the interview from the last show, this most recent show that just aired, the Dark Guardian. I really could relate to him, because he talked about how no matter where he went, like, he was always tormented by something, and a lot of people in the house didn't really believe or listen to him or anything like that. And growing up, I had a lot of experiences like that. Like, I remember one time sitting in my room in one of my older houses. I moved around a lot as a kid, so in one of the houses that me and my mom were staying in, I remember sitting there and just being completely in a state of panic and fear, to the point where I couldn't move. I was frozen, and I'm just there huddled up, like my knees to my chest, sitting on the bed. And I just felt like I was surrounded by something that wanted to hurt. And I would sit there, and I grew up Catholic, so I would pray, and I would say the Hail Mary, and I would say the Our Father, and just basically all the penance prayers that I learned in confession. And so I would just say those things, and it would go away. But I would have to be in a state of desperation until it went away. And I would try to tell my mom about it, but my mom does believe in this kind of stuff. But at that point in time, she was a young mom, and at this point, I think I was 9 years old, and she was 26. And so she's a single mom, and she's got way more concerns than me feeling scared in my room, or in the room by myself, So she's like, yeah, just go to sleep. And, I get it now as an adult, like, okay, yeah, it's not much of a concern to you when you've got all these other things to worry about. I get it. But as a kid, I was like, oh, like, nobody believes me. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm crazy, So I always wondered about that. And I just spent a lot of my life just wondering what all of this stuff is. And so I really relate to that last show.
Yeah.
The Dark Guardian show. Yeah. And I was stillborn as well. So I was born dead, and I didn't come back to life till like maybe 10 minutes later. And it's just that the doctors didn't want to give up on me. Like, I was completely suffocated by the umbilical cord, but when I was born, I had no vital signs whatsoever. Like, there was no faint heartbeat. My entire body was black, blue, purple, all these different colors, because there was no circulation going on. I had no heartbeat, no brain activity. I wasn't breathing. And the doctor just decided, like, he just didn't want to give up on me, and he would try. And so he tried for 10 minutes, and I came back to life. And ever since then, my mom told me that story, and I would always wonder, by the time I was like maybe 5 or 6 years old, like, what am I doing here then? Because I had a concept of death and life, and I had a concept of a soul, and because I was raised Catholic and I learned about all of that in school, and I would always question, like, okay, so why did I come back to life? And how did that affect me? And I don't know, I always wondered that. And as I got older, I started running into a lot of people who are into this kind of stuff, and they could tell from right away. Like, they would always tell, like, you've got one foot in death's door already. So it's like you're kind of halfway in between. And I guess, from time to time, I would be able to interact with all of these things that would happen. And maybe that's why I experienced the stuff I experienced. Like when I was younger, I could see stuff, but as I got older, I purposely tried to cut that out of my life because it was just causing too much weirdness, So that relationship with Dee that I had was the thing that brought me back into this world. Because for several years, I had just completely cut paranormal and spirituality out of my life. Everything was just work and money and just do what you got to do. Don't complain. Be a nice person. That's it. Nothing else to life. All this stuff is just coincidences. Let it go. But that relationship kind of brought me back into the world very forcefully.
Yeah.
Because of all the things that happened. And I had to start asking these questions again.
Wow. That's incredible, man. Absolutely incredible. I do you think that this whole, I don't know, endeavor that you've been on with the show is almost destiny then? I don't know. Like,
absolutely.
Dude, I mean, like the way we met, you weren't a listener of my show initially. Like, I mean, we met because of the Vegas shootings and stuff, and your one post went viral, and I contacted you asking how you are getting a hold of all the people that were there, and that's how the Vegas shows even started. Like we did what, 2, 3, 4 of them or something like that, where we had people coming on that were actually there, and the first show was put together because you were connected to these people because your post went viral, and then we built a relationship, and now you're working with me on the show. I mean, it just seemed like it was destiny for you to kind of get involved in the show and stuff. I mean, what are the odds of me finding you because of a viral post that went viral and contacting you, and then from there our relationship actually building, you being an artist and also being involved and enjoying this kind of content? It's just crazy.
Absolutely, man. I completely agree. And as a younger man, I never believed in destiny or fate. Because I just felt like, no, you make your actions, or you make your destiny through your actions. And I still believe that, but I also believe that there's like an underlying script here somewhere. And I feel like the only time you recognize that something is destiny is when you can look back at everything and see the opportunities that you took to allow things to fall into place the way they have now. And so I believe in destiny, but I believe destiny only happens to those who are aware of the opportunities and they take the opportunities and actions necessary to fulfill it. And I completely agree with you. And I remember listening to your show after you messaged me, and I wanted to just hear what the show was about. I remember listening to it like, oh, this is so cool, because I'm listening to these stories and I'm seeing all these things in my head. And I just wanted to draw them out and deciding to show you like, yeah, I listened to your show and I drew this picture and I just wanted to share it, like with no expectations at all. Like I just wanted to show you what your show is doing for me. And it's pretty cool that I get to express myself creatively and I have this awesome material, these visuals that are coming through, and it just moves into this. And I feel like if you hadn't taken the opportunity to message me and ask me about the post that I made about the Vegas shootings, none of this would happen. And if I didn't take the opportunity to why don't I just draw it out? Why don't I send it to you and just share it with you and not be afraid of like, oh, what if he doesn't think it's nice or whatever? Like,
yeah,
just show it to you, just share it with you. And if I hadn't taken that opportunity, all of this stuff, all of these steps were necessary to get here.
Yeah.
So I completely believe in it.
Absolutely. But dude, I mean, it's so crazy because the way you just said that, it's funny because you would send me sometimes, pieces you drew after hearing the show. And I used to think, wow, this is really good. But I was always like kind of shy to ask you to help with the show because I didn't want you thinking that I was taking advantage of our relationship. And so I remember the one time, like, you sent me some artwork and you're like, if you ever need help with anything, just let me know. And I was like, well, actually. and then it turns out that you and I subscribe to the very, very same philosophies on how to, cross promotion and working with people and giving. And it's just like, it was like we were meant to work together. I mean, even down to, our go-to guys when it comes to like business philosophies and stuff. I mean, it was just like everything clicked on all levels because, we're just pretty much the same person. Even, I look at pictures of you, I'm like, we even kind of look the same. So
yeah, man, you're like a taller Puerto Rican version of me, and I'm a smaller Hawaiian version of you. Got the same bald head. We got the same beard.
Yeah, pretty much the logo's you.
Yeah. When I wear the funny you say that, because when I wear the sweatshirt you sent with the logo, when I wear that out, everybody asked if so you're just gonna wear a logo of yourself? a little narcissistic, huh, buddy? Kind of fool yourself. I'm like, no, this is a show. My friend Tony, he runs the show, and like, oh, okay. And I showed them the picture, and they're like, dude, you guys are like twins.
Yeah. It's funny. It's funny, man. Like I was just looking online today and somebody said that I looked like a well-known Bigfooter. And I'm like, how? It doesn't even make sense. He has a full, beautiful head of hair. He's white. I mean, I said I'm Puerto Rican and a lot darker than him and bald, and I can't even grow hair like that. So I don't know how we look the same.
Yeah, man. We're definitely, because I'm Puerto Rican too, but I'm way less Puerto Rican than you are.
Yeah.
But yeah, like we have the same silhouette. So yeah, the logo is basically us.
Absolutely.
One of us. Pick one.
Absolutely. Dude, I appreciate you coming on and sharing these stories, man. I feel like this was something that should have been done a long time ago, and I do appreciate you sharing with us now.
Oh yeah, man. No problem. I've got a ton more. So if you ever need an interview,
dude, man,
I'll let you know.
Well, we might do a sequel at some point.
Please, that'd be so awesome. I love sharing these stories.
Well, that's the show, everybody. I really hope you enjoyed it. And if you did enjoy it, there are 3 things you can do to help support the show. 1, go to iTunes and leave a 5-star rating and review. 2, go to patreon.com/The Confessionals and sign up to become a patron. And 3, you can share the show that you're listening to right now around social media. And that is probably the most important thing that you can do to help this show grow. Share it with your friends, share it with your family, share it with everybody. And until next week, friends, stay safe, take care, and remember, the truth will set you free, but first it will piss you off. Bye. Hey, thanks for watching The Confessionals on YouTube. If you like what you heard, hit the subscribe button, hit the share button, and hit the like button. That would be a great help to me. And if you want more of The Confessionals on a weekly basis, every Thursday I come out with a special show just for members on my website. So if you want to check that out, go to theconfessionalspodcast.com, hit the join button, and become a member today. And every Thursday, you'll get a new show, and you can binge on previous shows, which there's almost 100 of them. So if you love the show, go ahead and check it out. But thank you very much for being here on YouTube and checking out the channel.